Hi everyone, it's Jakey again, and I'm back with a guide on the new augments in Odyssey. This is not the first augmenting guide I've done on Odyssey, because if there's one thing they did right about Odyssey is its name. We find ourselves once again toyed with by the gods, much like Odysseus, and prevented from finishing our journey. So first I'm going to look at the RP changes, then we're going to look at the Tier 3 armor augments, then the Nyame, then the Tier 1 ammo, and then the Tier 2 items, the Tier 3 weapons, and then finally I'm going to talk about my thoughts on Odyssey. So I realize this is a lot of numbers. I'm not going to stay here too long, but there's a few things I want to point out. First, the going from Vengeance 20 to 25, a significant increase in RP, and one of the more important things to note here is amplifiers only cost 1500 segments, and you can trade extra RP back for segments at 1-for-1. Even if you're doing a fight that you don't want to put RP into, you should probably be using amplifiers at Vengeance 25 because you'll actually net segments from the amplifier. It won't be enough to cover the full cost of the fight, but at least the amplifier will more than pay for itself. So that's a pretty important difference there. The other thing I want to point out is at Vengeance 15, when we could only go to rank 20, it took us a little over 33 wins to cap out. And then at Vengeance 20, when we could go to 25, it took us 35. So the amount of wins it takes to finish augmenting a piece has only been going up. Now, these number of wins is not taking amplifiers into account. Basically, an amplifier adds 2 wins worth of points, regardless however many points you would have gotten from the fight, regardless of if you won or not. And then even more if you're doing triple fights. I'm not going to go into all that. So you don't actually, doesn't take nearly this many runs to complete. This does show that the grind is increasing. Okay, here we have the Sakpada gear. Probably the biggest surprise with this update is that the new 4th stat line was actually added 20 to 30, not 25 to 30. So if you're already ranked 25, you've actually got most of the new stats already on your gear. So you just logged into a bunch of new stats on your gear, so that's pretty fun. Now, looking at the Sakpada set, we see the new stat line didn't do very much. Probably the most interesting thing here is that they added cure potency and block rate, which I think is kind of funny. Very clearly, these were added because a lot of paladins were just skipping augmenting their Sakpada gear because it didn't do much for paladins, so they threw in some stats to help paladin, but I mean, even 5 cure potency, that's not really going to do much for you. And you will rarely care about any additional block rate now with the new Prime Shield. Not particularly impactful. And then the other stat lines also then critical hit rate only 5%. It's not much. 5 vitality, 5 strength, like it's just not much. But don't get too upset about this. Sakpada set is still incredible, and you're still just adding stats to what's already the best gear for most purposes. It's actually kind of silly if you're on a Sakpada job how many different things the Sakpada set is best in slot for. So even just these modest stat increases is still kind of a big deal because it's still pulling it further ahead of everything else. And we still got the increased double attack damage going to rank 30 and the increased store TP going to rank 30. And I mean, critical hit rate is not nothing, it is something. So nothing mind blowing here, but it's still just an incredible set of gear. One thing I'm doing differently with this augmenting guide than the previous one. The previous one I did really was drawn up from the perspective of amplifiers. It was like a brand new thing. We didn't really know how bad the augmenting process would be, other than that prior to that it seemed nigh impossible. And now these days I see the primary limiting factor being just what clears have you been able to accomplish. So instead of showing the last few levels with each piece and kind of going, oh well, maybe you can skip going to rank 20 in this piece because rank 19 will be just as good or whatever, instead I'm focused more on how good can you get with each set of clears. So that's why we start at rank 15, where you just need a V0 clear, and you can do this. You do need at least one win on something above rank V0, maybe a V1 clear on something, and then anything that you have a V0 clear on, you can take all the way to rank 15 potentially. And then rank 20, you need V15 clears. 25, you need V20, and then rank 30, you need V25, the new ones. And these look to be some very difficult clears to get, so don't get too attached to the new rank 30 gear, because not only is it a lot of grind, but it's looking like these are going to be some very difficult fights that are going to need brand new strategies because they added the weapon skill wall. So it's going to drastically change a lot of strategies. Yeah, so that's the idea here. We're just going to kind of show how far you can get depending on how far you've cleared. Okay, here's the Glatty set, and here we have the first piece that I've felt I needed to highlight. So we're just going to talk about that first. That's the legs for the Glatty set. They added triple attack, going all the way up to 5%. That's a lot of triple attack. This is a amazing piece by rank 30. Even at rank 25, it's a very solid piece that'll probably find some use cases. But at rank 30, I mean, that's just massive. And I also love that it came with some subtle blow. A lot of these jobs do benefit from getting some subtle blow in there, especially if you're not having to sacrifice for it. And that's a lot of subtle blow. So that's really nice. No, it kind of overshadows everything else here, like, massively, though. Because it's like, do you want 3 triple attack or do you want 3 decks? Like, under basically every scenario, I want the triple attack. Like, yeah, every scenario, I think. Like, it's a massive, massive power level difference between this and all the other augments. So that's kind of crazy. I mean, they put regen on the mask. I mean, granted, I use the mask primarily as an idle piece with the regain. There are other headpieces with more regain, but the Glatty's mask has more defensive stats with it, so you know, you can kind of balance it, getting some more regen. It makes it a better idle piece, but I mean, do I care? Not really. Occasionally increase resistance status elements, and it's such a small amount. That's not a big deal. Although we do get additional double attack here. And the mask also got the additional counter. They seem to really be pushing counter builds lately, which is weird because so many of the fights we do are against stuff that you can't counter. So it's a little like, why are we focusing so much on that? The hands, we got the increased store TP, which is very nice. Dexterity is not like a terrible additional stat to add in here, but it's not amazing either. And then some strength on the boots. Seems kind of mediocre, especially when you compare it to these legs. But again, I mean, this is kind of the recurring theme on all this Odyssey gear. A lot of it's already very useful and very good. So even though a lot of these new augments aren't that big of a deal, you're still going to be using these. The body is heavily used, and we're getting more double attack on it. The legs now will be heavily used because of the triple attack. And the hands are pretty heavily used because of the store TP. So these are great pieces, and they're just getting better. Okay, here we have the Mumpaka set. Here I've highlighted the head. Although in this case, it's not nearly as good as the Glatty legs were. Because, well, the Glatty legs got 3 triple attack and then 5 triple attack. This is 3 double attack and then 5 double attack. Which is not nearly as good. Especially since this set adds triple attack on everything. So that actually kind of lowers the value of double attack a little bit. Also, I mean, we've got triple attack damage on the gloves. So double attack's not really what you're looking for here, but it's still easily the best of the additional stats added on for the 4th stat line. And, of course, it's a great piece. You've got TP bonus already on the head. And the skill chain damage increasing as well. So it's still a nice boost to weapon skills for the most part. But also, I mean, still a good piece because of the triple attack and now double attack, so you can use it for TP potentially as well. The body was pretty heavily used for TP on many of the jobs here because of the store TP, and it, again, comes with a bunch of triple attack. Regen is not going to do much to help, but it didn't really need a lot of help, so it's fine, I guess. The hands. So the biggest problem with the hands is that there's a lot of great competition for really good TP hand pieces. So the triple attack damage, which only affects your melee hits, doesn't affect weapon skills. It's kind of tough to fit it in. I've been using it mostly with Empyrean AM3 builds, and it's quite good for those, but it's hard to fit into other kinds of builds just because there's so many other good hand pieces. But I mean, we do increase the triple attack damage a little bit more in some decks. The legs are also really good. A very important physical damage limit piece. And so we got one more physical damage limit on them, which is nice. And they added magic evasion as the new stat line. Honestly, probably the biggest complaint with the Mumpaka set has been its relatively poor magic evasion as far as Odyssey sets go. I don't think 10 will fix that, but it makes it a little better, I guess. And then the boots. I mean, the most interesting thing on these boots now, I think, is that the MAB is now up to 45. That's a lot. I don't think that's enough to where I'm using it for something else, but I mean, it's enough that I'll have to start checking whenever I'm thinking about magic damage and stuff where MAB matters, because it's a lot. Okay, next up we have the Kanga set. So the hat got some subtle blow, and is also now up to 45 MAB. Of course, Ranger and Core do a lot of magic damage. I don't know if 45 will be enough for either of them. Obviously, for Ledin, you're not going to want this because of the Pixie hairpin, but yeah, it's enough that I'm definitely going to have to run numbers on it again, so that's interesting. The subtle blow 2, well, great. It's not only 5 is not much, so I don't know that that's gonna significantly increase the use cases here. The body, of course, the TP bonus continued to increase. That's great. They had critical hit rate, which is nice. This is a very nice piece. You can use it several different ways. Obviously, the TP bonus makes it useful for a lot of weapon skills. It comes also with a good amount of physical damage limit, so that makes it a nice physical damage limit and TP bonus piece for a ton of weapon skills. It also has a good amount of store TP on it, so you could potentially use it as a mid-shot piece, depending what you're doing. Critical hit rate will help with that purpose a bit. As to the weapon skilling, I mean, it would pretty much only help with Jishnus, and I think I would probably lean much more towards the Empyrean body for Jishnus, just because under Velocity Shot, the Empyrean body provides a massive ranged attack bonus. And they both provide a good amount of physical damage limit. The Empyrean body plus 3 has, I think, one more physical damage limit, which isn't that big of a deal, but the much bigger deal is having so much ranged attack on it allows it to support more physical damage limits in other slots. And ranged crits, unlike melee crits, actually scale really strongly with physical damage limit. Stacking physical damage limit for Jishnus, as long as you have enough attack to support it, is really, really good. So I would heavily lean towards the Empyrean body for the huge range attack bonus to support just stacking physical damage limit elsewhere. So I don't know that I will actually use this much for Jishnus, even though the extra crit rate should help a bit for that purpose. Okay, the gloves, we got recycle, I mean, whatever. The pants, we got strength, which is nice, but not a lot of strength. And the feet, we got agility, but again, not much. Increase the true shot a bit more. I mean, 10 true shot is a ton of true shot. If you are in true shot range, you definitely want to use these feet, and these feet will encourage you to really want to be in a true shot range more, which does help out archery builds a bit, because they have an easier time being in true shot range while being safe in a lot more fights than a gun will. Okay, next we have the Egu set. This set has gotten way more interest recently because of Sorority becoming heavily Black Mage favored, with the weapon skill wall nerfing everyone else, as well as Scholar, of course. Scholar actually relies much more on this set. as there's a bit more competition for Black Mage slots, both with their more of their MP slots. So like the Scholar MP feet are of course like the most broken item in all of the Imperium pieces, but the rest of their nuking set is a bit more situational, whereas the Black Mage you're using 3 out of 5 of the MP pieces right now. So we'll see if that changes here. So head got some minus enmity, which is kind of whatever. Although the magic damage did increase, so that helps. Actually, so probably the first thing to notice at the set in general is going from 25 to 30 only got us 2 more MAB on each piece. This is going from 20 to 25 only got us 3. Prior to that, we got 1 every single level. So it's been a little disappointing that the MAB has been scaling less and less. These are all very good pieces that are heavily used by mages, and we're now using mages so much, they do have to be careful about making them too strong. I guess it's okay that they're being a little conservative here. Anyways, moving on here to the robe. So the robe got magic damage, so that's good. That's a nice addition here. The biggest problem for the Ego robe is that unlike the Egu set, the Empyrean +3 sets for the mage jobs have MAB that's different on each piece, and they always have the most on the body. So there's a lot more competition for the body slot here than the other slots when we were comparing to the MP +3 items. So the magic damage is going to help, but it's still going to be a little more difficult for the robe to fit in, I think. The hands were basically the best Ego piece because they have magic burst damage too. We did get an additional 1 magic burst damage 2 on them. Got the MAB like everything else, but mind is not going to do anything for you. However, I still think this is going to be your go-to hands for Black Mage and Scholar magic bursting. So still great piece, but they knew they didn't need to add anything to it, I guess. The legs got intelligence, which is nice, but it's not a lot. I don't know if this will be enough to increase the use of these legs or not. And then we got the feet. Spell interruption rate down, and not a lot of it. There are better feet for spell interruption rate down, but these will be used for midcast in a lot of situations, whether you're doing Drain Asper or potentially nuking. And so just having incidental spell interruption rate down, even if you're not stacking it to 102, it still lowers your rate of being interrupted. So, I mean, it's fine. Yeah, they definitely were a bit conservative with this set, but it's a really good set, so can't complain too much. Okay, we've got the Bonsai set here. The Bonsai hat is just incredible. So it was already pretty much the best TP piece for the jobs that could equip it. And now you can get 1 more store TP, but more importantly, on the 4th stat, they added quadruple attack. Not double attack, not triple attack, quadruple attack. 2% at 25, and then 3% at 30. This is now easily the best TP headpiece for any of the jobs that can equip this, which includes Red Mage, by the way, but also Bard. And of course, all those melee white mages out there get excited. So this is an incredible piece. This is really, really good. Okay, moving on to the body. This is your PDL body. It's increasing up to 8 PDL now. This faces a few struggles, though. Probably the number one problem being pretty much all the jobs that are on Bonsai are just like constantly attack starved. So it's really hard to support a PDL piece, especially when you could just be running Nyame and getting some weapon skill damage and double attack. So it's difficult to justify this piece, but I mean, now that you're up to 8 PDL, it might make some niche play. The hands, I mean, okay, yeah, sure, they have magic burst damage too on them, but they don't really have the MAB to support them, so these are not a good magic bursting piece. Mind isn't going to help that. The legs, Summoner already has much stronger blood pack damage legs available to them, so it's not really going to do much there. Could use it as a pet damage taken piece now, because that's their new stat line, but I mean, that's a pretty niche use there. There might be some summoners who would be interested in that. The feat, the main thing on the feat is just regen potency, now plus 10. But keep in mind, you're sacrificing duration for that. So you could be running duration feat. And in the case of Red Mage, they have some feat with just massive duration available to them. So it's a big sacrifice to get this potency going. But depending what you're doing, it might be worth it. Also, now you've got some niche use for Summoner with the Avatar All Attributes. But yeah, massively overshadowing all of these is the hat now with the quadruple attack. Okay, moving on to the Nyame. Nyame Path A. And yes, I know no one goes Path A, but well, let me tell you about it. So I've had to highlight 2 of these because they added critical hit rate to them. And by 30, it's like a lot of critical hit rate. In addition to, continuing to scale the store TP and the PDL and the accuracy. So like at rank 25, this is sort of like having a all jobs malignance +1 set, which is obviously insane. And by rank 30, it's almost like a malignance +2 set. It does have less haste, so keep that in mind. You can certainly work around that there's plenty of ways to still cap out your haste, but it does have that limitation. But otherwise, I mean, it's even better against physical damage usually, because you've got just a lot more defense on it. You've got basically the same magic evasion, and it now has significantly more store TP. And now you've even added large amounts of crit rate to it. So, I mean, just an incredible TP set, especially for Mythic builds or Kraken Club builds. Absolutely wish I could have a Nyame Path A. The problem is, a good portion of the jobs that really you would want this do have access to Malignance. And when we go over to Path B, there is really nothing competing for a ton of jobs. So it's just really hard not to go Nyame Path B. Especially since if you're talking about getting 20 and V25 clears, you're going to need a wide selection of jobs. You're going to have jobs that just absolutely demand Path B. And so it's really hard to go Path A even if you want to. So here's Path B. Weapon skill damage. That's the big thing here. But also the double attacks continuing to increase. I highlighted the legs because they got strength added to them, which boosts all physical weapon skills, and it's a good chunk of strength. Obviously, those who run vitality-based weapon skills are going to be a little bit more excited since they decided to only add strength and vitality. My prediction was they would just add, increase to all stats sort of thing, but they chose to just specify certain ones, which certainly benefits some weapons and weapon skills more than others. So looking at rank 30, we've increased the weapon skill damage by an additional 1% across the board. And then 1 extra double attack across the board, except for the body, which got 2 double attack. The double attack is pretty important because, largely because we can't get the Path B and Path A, because you had to choose one or the other. For the jobs that don't have Malignance, if they need a TP that with this kind of magic evasion, they don't have Sakpada set either, then they might be stuck having to melee and Nyame, like my Dragoon is. And so at least having some double attack is pretty helpful. Also, of course, double attack, good for a lot of weapon skills as well. I don't know how much I need to talk about how this is an absolute game changer for a ton of jobs that just don't have otherwise good weapon skill sets. And even jobs that do have good weapon skill sets, this set is so good even by rank 25 that for most jobs, any weapon skill that cares about weapon skill damage, you're running like your MP +3 piece that has 12 weapon skill damage on it, and then you're running 4 pieces of Nyame Path B. Like that's kind of the go-to for most weapon skills. And here, I mean, now the body's up to 13. And you've got the double attack with it. Like, some of these pieces might even start to edge out some of those Imperium +3 pieces again. So they didn't need to add much to it. I do like that they added accuracy to it, because Path B does not give accuracy on the augments otherwise, and so its accuracy was not necessarily that great. So getting a little bit of extra accuracy in here is definitely pretty helpful. Yeah, so I mean, this is what most of us are using and most of us are going to be sticking with. Although, I mean, Path A has gotten so much better, I am going to be running the numbers on, can I get away with switching anything to Path A? Okay, Path C. Now, normally I wouldn't be giving Path C really a second thought, but I am playing Black Mage most of the time now because that's everything's gone magic between Swordy and now Odyssey, so I guess I should take a second look here. One thing I will point out right away, the magic attack bonus and magic damage has continued to scale one every level all the way to 30. So that's scaling more so than the Egu was. Part of why I didn't worry much about this set before is, well, I'll just augment my Egu set and, that'll be, just as good. And then I can focus on the weapon skill set with Path B and not worry about this. But, I mean, this is continuing to scale, so this might start to edge ahead of Egu here. I do think Egu has higher int on the base stats, though, so it's probably still ahead. Although, looking at the fourth augment, we've got int on the body and even more int on the legs. So it might actually have some pieces here that might be beating the Egu set. And given how much I play Black Mage now, I might have to consider that. Previously, the big standout with this set was Ninja, who doesn't really have access to a good nuking set otherwise. I mean, your nuking set on Ninja is just whichever set of Nyame you have, even if you didn't go Path C usually, unless you have like some crazy dark matter augments. So if you can go Path C, your Ninja nuking just goes like off the charts. It's kind of crazy. The problem is Path B is like even more broken for your hybrid weapon skills on Ninja, as well as easily being your best for physical weapon skills on Ninja too. So it's kind of hard to justify sacrificing all that just for your nuking. But if you're mostly playing mage jobs now and mostly doing nuking, yeah, might have to give this one a more thorough look at. Continue to increase the magic burst damage 2 across the board as well. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely becoming a much more appealing set than it was previously. Path D, they added pet damage taken across the board, and like a decent amount of it, which is a great stat line. Pets can stack their DT much higher than players can, so there's definitely interesting things you can do by capping out your pet DT so that your pets can just tank stuff for you. Also, note the body has the pet damage plus continuing to scale up, as well as the legs also have pet damage plus scaling. So, I mean, that should make these a bit more appealing than they were previously. The pet damage is definitely pretty impactful. But again, you can only pick one. It's really hard to go away from Path B. Okay, ammo items. I don't think anyone cares about this one. This is your 3 double attack, 3 store TP ammo. They added dexterity to it, which is nice. And then the dex and strength continued to scale to rank 30. So yeah, that's a nice upgrade. This is the summoner ammo. They added Avatar Enmity Plus. I don't particularly love this, just because, well, sometimes I want my avatar to tank, sometimes I don't. And this is the best ammo for Summoner. So I don't love that they've just added Avatar Enmity Plus to it. when I might not necessarily always want it. But they did continue to increase the avatar all attributes, so that's nice, as well as the accuracy. The animator, I haven't heard great things about it so far. The new stat of special attack damage plus 3% and then 5% sound like it should be a pretty good stat. I don't know if that'll be enough to make puppets want this now, because I know previously it was not seen particularly amazingly, so we'll see what happens there. Okay, here's the tier 2 items. Big one here, Sheer Earring. They added store TP to it. It already has double attack, so this makes it easily one of the best TP earrings available, in addition to being good for a ton of weapon skills. So that's pretty good. The only issue with Sheer Earring, of course, is it will drain your MP pretty quickly to mildly reduce your hate, which can be at times potentially problematic for Dark Knight. Obviously, Dark Knight has lots of ways of getting their MP back, but then you actually have to use those weapon skills and abilities to do so. And so if you're, maybe you're doing a fight where you need to be able to stun certain abilities, you just want to have your MP available to do that, this can get in the way of that sort of thing occasionally. So be a little bit careful about just blindly using this on Dark Knight. Although you certainly can use it on Dark Knight. It can be great depending what you're doing. For all the other jobs, they'll just use it and they don't care about their MPs. So yeah, that's the only thing I would note there. Then look at the rest. So this is the really defensive dagger. It gets some magic defense bonus, sure. The really defensive katana gets some magic evasion. That's a nice little addition there. This is the weapon skill damage ring. That really just needed more stats, but they gave it some skill chain damage. I mean, there's a few jobs that use this. Skill chain damage, I guess, helps them just a little bit, but it's still going to be pretty limited as to how many jobs actually benefit from this ring. This is the belt with the true shot on it. A little bit of minus enmity, I mean, that's fine, but Ranger can usually cap out their minus enmity pretty easily, so kind of whatever. And then this is the enfeebling duration belt. The minus enmity is going to do basically nothing for it, but the enfeebling magic skill has continued to scale up, so that's really good. That's going to help improve your Frazzle 3 and Distract 3 sets on Red Mage, especially. Yeah, that's actually pretty good as well. Okay, moving on to weapons. And I think that by far the big one here, Kanga's Axe, got TP bonus in the augment, and it's been confirmed this does in fact work in the offhand. So that actually opens up a lot of interesting builds for Warrior and Beastmaster, which are the only jobs on this axe. Of course, the issue is those are the two Fencer jobs, so they don't necessarily want to dual wield anyways, but this means they certainly have the option to. It's still, I think, going to depend a lot on what sub job you want. Do you even have access for a sub job depending on what you're doing? Obviously, there's a lot of times when you just want super jump, so you kind of have to sub Dragoon, and then you don't get dual wield, and then you can't really benefit from this. But there are also times when you might want to sub Ninja or Dancer for their other perks anyways, and if you're subbing one of those, I think you go ahead and you do the dual wield build with this over a Fencer build with those sub jobs. So we'll see where it lands, but I think this is definitely gonna lead to some relevant builds. I actually think all these weapons would have been a lot more interesting if they had just put the TP bonus on most of them. It would have been a great way of finally phasing out the Magian TP bonus weapons. To have some actual eye-level weapons with good stats that have, they don't have the 1,000 TP bonus, but they have 500 at rank 30. And there's enough other TP bonuses that you can usually get up close to 1,000 now on most jobs. I think that would have been a really interesting thing to do that would have made most of these weapons far more useful. Unfortunately, they only put it on the axe, but maybe they're just testing the waters there. Maybe they'll add more weapons with TP bonus augments in the future if this goes well. Looking at these other weapons, so we got skill chain damage on the hand-to-hands, just whatever. The Glatty knife, which is already widely used, it's a very good weapon. Got some subtle blow 2, and it goes all the way up to 10 subtle blow 2, which is a good amount. This is actually a very nice upgrade to what's already a very widely used weapon. It's definitely going to help a ton for any kind of subtle blow build you want to do. Yeah, I mean, that's really nice. Sakpada's sword going up to refresh +3 is actually pretty good. Now, Paladin, of course, their SU5 can go up to refresh +4, I believe, so it's not going to beat out that. For the other jobs, though, you could potentially swap this in for a refresh idle piece. Of course, they have options for weapons that have aftermaths and stuff that give them more refresh, but if you're planning on just swapping out weapons for other reasons or whatever, and you just want to get some more refresh going, this is really nice piece. You don't need aftermath or anything. You just equip it, you got refresh. So I could see some niche use around that. It's pretty niche. I'm usually not that concerned about getting extra refresh. The great sword got a bunch of counter. See, they really are pushing these counter builds. It's kind of strange. Okay, we've got the this is the Beastmaster axe. It got skill chain damage. Okay. The great axe got 5 strength and vitality. You couldn't make it 10. Like, I don't think that's gonna change how much this is used. The scythe got DT. They do know Dark Knight has Sakpada, right? Like they didn't need a DT scythe. Like, okay. Well, I mean, no one needed regen +3 on the weapon. So I mean, the polearm's a joke. The katana is actually already a really good offhand weapon for ninja, especially if you're doing skill chaining and magic bursting. Getting a little bit of extra docket on there is nice. Would have liked to see a bit more, but I mean, it is a weapon that's already being used, so making it better is still nice. Okay, and our final page of augments to look at here. We've got the Great Katana. It got some more strength, whatever. Bonsai's Rod. This is heavily used for nuking on many jobs. It just got minus enmity added to it. But the MAB did continue to scale, as well as the accuracy, magic accuracy. I guess I can't complain too much, especially since it's already so widely used. And it's already, in many cases, beating out mythics, depending on a few scenarios. But it's quite good. The biggest problem it usually runs into is just that it's not a staff. So it doesn't get to benefit from staff weapon skills, which are usually much more helpful for mages. Then we look at the Mumpaka staff. Now it got basically the same stats as the rod, except it got 5 into mind instead of the enmity, which is a little bit better. The big problem for the staff is that grips are just not as good as shields, so it has a bit of catch up to do. Although it does have access to much more useful weapon skills, so yeah, I mean it's definitely getting better. With 5 more MAB and 5 more int, it might now be the best non-mythic staff for nuking. I'd have to double check on that, but it's definitely much more in competition than it was before. The crossbow, I've actually thought about using this crossbow for a few shenanigans on Ranger, mostly because it gives weapon skill damage, which can help with nagling builds, but then it's still an eye level weapon, and gives you access to all the various bolts you could be using on a crossbow, which is awesome. The biggest problem is there's still not like a crossbow bolt that's comparable to the weapon skill damage arrow that's available when you go with archery. And so I was really hoping they'd maybe add some more melee stats on here, but Snapshot is not that. So it's going to continue to just be a build that just doesn't quite justify itself. And then they put a trivial amount of recycle on the bow just to mock us, I guess. Okay, so my thoughts on Odyssey. There's a lot of things I love about Odyssey. The augmenting that was added to Unity items to make those relevant again was awesome. Also, the money you could make, either solo or in groups, was quite good and continues to be quite good, actually. It introduced some incredibly difficult but beatable fights. Like that's been a big problem with Final Fantasy 11 is yes, we have a lot of in the past we've had many fights that are extraordinarily difficult to the point of being unbeatable. But here they were beatable but still very difficult, which is actually a much better place to be. I want to be challenged, but to be able to eventually overcome. I don't want to just look at a fight and be like, yeah, we're never going to beat that. So, I mean, that's been pretty good. I mean, and that high difficulty has led to some truly epic moments. The first time my group beat the V15 tree, when I finally killed it, I was the last person still alive in the group, and I had like 80 HP with the dot on me, so I was about to die regardless. And my last swing just managed to finish it off before I died. Like that's amazing. That is an epic fight I will always remember. Our V20 Bumba win, where we managed to finally have the stars align, so it didn't denounce right away. We survived the fetters, did everything right, but we did have a unfortunate ad in the pig, who eventually killed off the white mage, and then we start popping whatever we can to try and stay alive just a little bit longer to finish it off. Eventually, after I used up my wyvern healing breaths, I eventually ate my own wyvern just to get one last extra heal to just live a little bit longer, and we managed to finish it off. That's an epic fight that I will always remember. And I do value that we had such difficult, challenging, but beatable fights. That was great. Another thing I like about Odyssey, if you're just looking to get going in endgame, just try to get some V0 clears. And you might need some help, unfortunately. I think they should really just make the V0s like not cost any segments to enter. Just let people go in and get their V0 clears for free, basically. I think that would be much better. That way they can get help and we can get them V0 clears. Because actually getting V0 clears will just catapult you to being able to participate in endgame events almost right away. Because, well, you won't have the augments. The augments for most of the gear is just providing extra damage, whereas the great defensive stats you get right away, which lets you at least survive and participate in endgame events. So the basic unaugmented gear and the V0 fights are actually far more accessible than I think a lot of people realize. And I think that's great. I just think the problem is not enough people realize, like, oh, yeah, I could actually go do these V0 fights. Like, I could get there's people who can solo these fights. Like, it's not that hard to actually put together a group that can beat these. And then you can just buy the gear right away. You don't have to do a ton of farming or anything, and then you're at a pretty decent state right away. So there is actually some good stuff in Odyssey for people just looking to catch up and get to a base level of gear where they can participate in endgame. And I think that's really good. Now to the bad, the number one complaint I have, of course, has to be the segment farming, and that we can't save up key items, so we can't just have like 1 or 2 days a week where we can just use all our key items and do a ton of segment farming and be good. Also, that it costs segments to even go and help people with V0, so I have to make sure I'm farming up extra segments so I'm available in case someone needs help. And that kind of sucks. But the scheduling is where it really got rough. Like, that's where I stopped making videos for about a year, because I was just burnt out from every day at odd hours, whatever worked for the group, to try and get a segment run in. We'd have, usually, because we're spread out across different time zones, we'd usually have like, you might have one person in an office meeting logging in and coming along. We'd have like 1 or 2 of us might be half asleep because we had to like wake up in the middle of our normal sleep time to meet in the middle of another person's lunch break, in the middle of trying to make it work every day is just not manageable, at least not for our group. And that's where we eventually switched to just doing weekend runs. But we really should have a lot more flexibility in the use of our key items. This push towards more daily content, just like what they've done with Sortie as well, is really problematic. At least with Sortie, I feel like I can make a good amount of progress solo if I want. Yes, I can solo farm segments as well, but it doesn't feel as productive to me, at least. So like the whole segment system is a big problem. Also, like, why do we even have to do so much segment farming just to fight the bosses? I would be in favor of even just like each weekly reset, everyone just gets 3 free key items for doing the bosses again. So you don't have to do so much segment farming. That's really like the limiting factor, and not every job is great at segment farming. Not there's a lot of issues with segment farming that I don't love. So that's like probably my number one issue is the whole segment system. I'm not a fan of it. Then the next big thing I want to talk about, the difficulty tiers. So like V20 included some incredibly difficult fights. That said, once you like finally worked out your strategies and worked out all your gear and builds you wanted to do, most of them you could get a pretty high win rate against. The problem was it was still only a win rate because there were so many things that could cause you to lose, such as getting a bad aura, or a bad proc, or like there was a whole bunch of things that are completely out of the player's control that are enough that they can cause you to just lose. And depending on your build, there might not be anything you can do about it other than just, oh, we got a bad aura, we can't win now. And that's kind of terrible. And there's really no reason for that. Like, just make the auras not be random so we can plan around whatever aura they've decided to give the fight. And so then we can actually have a plan that can consistently beat them. And I think this also ties to another thing I really don't like, which is the RP farming is incredibly boring. Because it's just not practical to kill 3 V20s. And now we're going to be looking at trying to do 3 V25s. And I haven't talked about the problems with V25s yet. But it just wasn't really practical to try and kill 3 V20s in a run. So because of how amplifiers worked, it just made more sense. You just take each one to 79 if you can. You only really need to get them down to 94, but you get a few more points if you take it to 79. You didn't really want to take it below 79 because the next increase in points happens after the ad spawns, and then it's regenning, and you've got this ad running around causing havoc. It gets easier to just stop at that point, and then everyone but the tank and healer can basically AFK. But it just makes it incredibly boring. You're never attempting to beat anything. The RP farming is just miserable. And it doesn't have to be. Like, I would totally take if they actually made the auras fixed and not random, so we can actually have strategies that can consistently win. And then I think they would also have to increase the RP per win, because you're actually trying to kill them. And if they did those things, I would be fine with them going ahead and nerfing the whole amplifier giving you points, giving you multiple wins worth of points regardless of if you actually kill anything. And I think that would be a lot more fun. This whole just boring grind is awful. And, we go through all the struggle to figure out a way to win, and then we never even attempt to win again. Like, what is that? I think that's a terrible... The current system in that way is terrible. Like, I think the amplifier has to work the way it works right now because we can't consistently win. And it would just be, like, impossible to augment if we had to win to get points. But we could consistently win if we just didn't have random bad augment auras messing everything up. Like, and there's why do we need random bad auras? Just to be like, oh, sorry, you spent all these points to enter, and now you lose, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, no, that's terrible. just change it so that doesn't happen, and then you can build a much better system. Another big problem, as I see it, with these fights is that they're so damage specific. So I get, like, I think it was good what they did with Ongo, to have a fight that really forced you to have good black mage, good scholar. But it's really caused problems, I think, much more so with the other fights, because we end up having to have multiple DD jobs so we can do different types of damage on different fights. And the weapon skill walls they're adding now has further exacerbated that. So there's only a few jobs that really do effective blunt damage, but effective blunt white damage, that's like just monk. I mean, there's a few jobs that have good blunt weapon skills they can do, but there's really not much that can do the white damage, and so that's really going to be limiting. And we see that with a lot of these fights. So like Dragoon can also do great slashing weapon skill damage, but they're not going to be able to do effective slashing white damage. So like a lot of these fights where we could have had, where we were already somewhat limited by the jobs because of the damage types, with the weapon skill wall, we're going to be that much more limited by the damage types, because there's a lot fewer good white damage builds. I mean, it basically comes down to which Empyreans you have available. So, yeah, I think the weapon skill wall is going to make the damage type issues even worse than they already were. And by having these damage type limitations, it really has forced people to level and gear additional jobs. I mean, I was at, 9 jobs fully geared and mastered and everything when Odyssey came out, and I had to level and gear 2 more since then, basically exclusively for Odyssey. And basically everyone in my group has had to level and gear additional jobs exclusively for Odyssey. Like, that's kind of crazy. Like, I totally get, saying, hey, people should, level and gear multiple jobs. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I think, the game has been out a long time. Most of the jobs are actually a lot of fun right now. People should be exploring more. But, like, it, especially with, inventory limitations, and they want to charge us for additional wardrobes and stuff, like, it's kind of ridiculous that 9 wasn't enough. And most people in my group have a lot of jobs already, and yet we had to bring more jobs online because of Odyssey. Like, that really kind of shows there's some issues there. And for newer players and stuff, again, that's one of the things they hear about. They'll hear, oh, I need like a ton of jobs geared and leveled for Odyssey. I guess I can't do it. And it's like, again, you don't need all that just to get a V0 clear. Like, they do require, I think, 3 level 99 jobs to enter, but we can get you that. Don't worry about it. Let's get you some V0 clears and get you going. Like, one of the big problems that I'm repeatedly pointing out here is how all these troubles we have with augmenting, people hear about and just hear about that as being a problem with Odyssey, and so then it scares away people from even doing the basic stuff in Odyssey, and I think that's a big problem as well. And it really doesn't have to be like that. Like, if they didn't have the damage type restrictions, I wouldn't have needed so many different DD jobs ready to go. Now, I've already kind of touched on the solutions, but again, change the key item system for doing segment farming runs, lessen the need for segment farming runs, look at the random auras and other random procs and stuff like that, and make them not random so that we can much more consistently win. And then if you actually do that, look at making the RP farming process a lot less boring. Which may involve nerfing the amplifiers, but you have to nerf the fights a bit first. And it's not even like making the fights easier, right? Like, the way we're winning right now is we just wait for all the random stuff to align correctly and then we win. We shouldn't have to do that. Like, just keep it so like the wins will be the same. The difficulty that we face when we win will be the same difficulty we will have to face if you get rid of the random crap there. And so it's not really making the fights easier, it's just not wasting our time as much before we can do the fights. And if you do that, I would be okay with you nerfing amplifiers. And then look at the damage restrictions a bit, because it's, especially now that you're putting weapon skill walls on everything, that's really going to limit us in terms of, like, we're going to have very specific builds. There's going to be a lot less room for creativity, a lot less room for us to have varying builds that can work and win. And I think that's not great. Not to mention, expect all the MP mats to skyrocket in price in the near future. So yeah, I mean, those are the fixes I would look at doing. Okay, closing thoughts. So I think there's a lot of great things about Odyssey. I think there's a lot of big problems with Odyssey. And probably the most troubling part is that I'm seeing the new V25s coming out, and it seems to be doubling down on all the problems of Odyssey, while we still haven't addressed any, like, trying to fix any of the problems. So we've got even more grind, even more difficulty, even more restrictions on what kind of a build we can do that'll work. All the problems I've had with Odyssey have gotten worse, and none of them have gotten any better. And only thing we've gotten out of it that's good, I guess, is more difficulty, but I think we had enough difficulty. Like, most of the player base has not beaten V20s yet. And now we've got V25s that are substantially harder than the V20s. That's a bold choice to make. I don't know that I agree with it. I do like the new gear. I think some of the new augments are pretty exciting. But I think they were right to keep most of them relatively mild, just given how good the gear already is. So yeah, I mean, I see Odyssey as a very mixed bag these days. I do hope they address some of these problems I've pointed out at some point. Otherwise, this is going to be an increasingly elitist set of content, it seems. Anyways, that's, I guess, all my thoughts on Odyssey for now. Please, if you've made it this far, please like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. And I'll see you next time.